Coming up on AI in the Classroom, we're vibe coding with Claude. Hi, I'm Guy Trainin, a professor at UNL.
And I'm Williams, a grad student at University of Nebraska-Lincoln.
And today we are going to be vibe coding with Claude. Vibe coding is something that has emerged in the last few months as part of this rise of generative AI. And it's basically coding using plain English inside one of these generative AI platforms. Claude, which is one of the generative AIs that we use, is the one that has emerged as the most productive in this area. And Williams is going to walk us through some of the options. So tell us a little bit about Claude.
Yeah, so Claude basically accepts your plain language. You can type the prompt that you want to help you get an output for. So basically you give it a prompt. Let's say you're a teacher, you want to create any application, you can just enter it in the window and it will give you an output in a form of visuals. So after the code that it generates, it will give you an output for you to see, which you can help your students to work with, for example, a game or any application of a sort. So,
okay, so what we really are looking for are ways that Claude can help you program little programs that can teach your students something specific. The advantage of this, for years we've been buying software that we liked or didn't like, that did a lot of things, but not always the things we wanted. And here's an opportunity to create very specific programs to do something that we need at that moment. And this can be created in a few minutes. So let's try one.
Yeah. So today we want to create an application, a game for students. Okay, let's say you are teaching a grade 3 students and you want to create a game for them. You have to be very specific with your prompt.
Okay.
So you tell it, create a game. Let's say a jumping game.
That teaches
numbering, how to count numbers.
So the teacher's counting? Okay.
Yes.
So we're trying to create a game. We're calling it a jumping game. Let's see what Claude thinks about it. So this is actually not very specific. We started with a very general prompt, and let's see what happens. This is when the magic happens, and in the background, Claude is actually thinking through the problem and then generating some code in Python. And you can kind of have a glimpse at what it's doing, although it is too fast for anybody to follow in real time. But you can see that it's being created in the background. And it's kind of magical to see it happen, right?
Yeah. And the one important thing about it is that you don't have to have a programming background. Any teacher without programming or computer science background can just give it any prompt and it will do a good job for you.
Yeah, and the important thing to remember here is that sometimes you need to iterate a few times to make sure that it works, and that Claude actually knows how to debug some of its own programs. So if it doesn't work on a first try, you can ask it to try to fix the bug. You can also try to specify what the bug is, but you don't have to know code to be able to fix it. If the program is very complicated, it is very clear that if it gets stuck, it is unable to move forward. So vibe coding is still limited to fairly simple kind of programs. And if you know coding, then it creates most of the program and you can just debug it, which is a very different role than the person who's writing all of the code. So let's see what we created.
Okay.
So we need to count to 4. And let's press on the jump. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. So you have to jump really fast.
Yes.
I kind of like it. It's 1, 2, 3, 4. You can't go too slow. So this is giving us count to 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And we made it. And now it's making another thing come up. And you can try again. And what you can see on the left-hand side is that Claude also gives you a lot of explanations about how the game works, what is the feedback, what is the time challenge, and the hints that people need to know. And you can see that there are levels, there are streaks. So it very much looks like a video game.
Yeah.
And what do you think the advantage is of using something like this?
Yeah, so the advantage is that you can easily, quickly come out with a game. It depends on the idea in your mind. You have to be specific. This was very general, so it couldn't. You have to give it the level, the speed, and everything. Whatever you want to see in the game. Let's say the jumping game, you can describe your characters that you want to have in your game, and it will just bring out those for you. But if you just become generic, it will just give
Create
you anything, something for you.
And I kind of like the very basic nature of this one, because if you're trying to teach something very basic, we really don't want to have too many distractions, too many bells and whistles and sounds and all of that. Sometimes very basic games, when we're teaching something very specific, is really, really helpful. Do we want to try another one? Let's try another one. Now, in Claude, you can create in the same window, and that means that it remembers what we just did and we can improve it, or you can open a new window, so you can start a new chat and make a new game. Let's make a game that teaches past verbs in English. Okay? So we already see here that it's selected to call the game Time Travelers Past Tense Adventure. So it's giving us a little bit of context. I'm kind of excited to see what it's going to do. You can also see that it's coding, just like in the previous example. It's just coding. Now, again, notice we started with a very simple prompt, because sometimes you don't have a great idea. Sometimes you have a great idea and you say, I want to create a game that looks like the Oregon Trail and does this and talks about the, space race, right? And then it can do that. But I kind of love it when you give it something simple and you see what it creates. Sometimes it creates something that is just delightful. So yes, you can create something very specific, but you can use that general prompt. And I'm kind of looking at the prompts in the game, and it's basically a cloze exercise where the verb is the missing words, and so it's delightful to see. So this is actually a really good moment. It reached its limit, so it's actually asking us, do you still want to go on? And then you press continue. And if you don't, then you can either retry or you can actually stop because it's getting too complicated. One of the ways I'm thinking about this is a way to limit it is to give it a list of verbs you want to have in the past tense, or a type of past tense we want to work out. For example, if we want to work only on D and ED as a past tense, that's one way to do it. Or if we want just irregular past, so we can be more specific. We gave it a very broad definition, which is probably why it's creating so many prompts. But at the same time, it's delightful to see what it'll come up with. And you are not seeing all the time that it took us to run Claude. It took a few minutes. But what I do want to highlight is while it took Claude a few minutes, it would take us probably a few days. And that's only if you know how to code. All right, so just so you know, we're picking up. It took us a few minutes and a few tries to get the right prompt. And eventually what we ended up doing is we ended up trying to define exactly what verbs we were looking for, because what Claude kept doing was going to a wider and wider and wider group of verbs. And so just to make it very doable, and also to really think about how do we teach English. When we teach English as a second language or even as a first language, we have a set of verbs you usually work with. So we don't work with any verb possible. And so we created this game. Let's try to run through this game. So it is a cloze exercise. So it says complete this sentence with the past tense. Yesterday, I Okay, what happens? You check your answer. All right, so we got a score. Now try to write a wrong answer. Let's say took. All right, so we tried an error and we checked our answer and it says try again. This is not the past tense of talk, hint. And the hint is not really helpful. So this is where, AI can do certain things and be partially helpful. So let's try what happens if I write the right one, talked, check answer, correct. So this is a very simple game. So if you created this game, right, you can click on publish, right? And publish gives you a link that anybody can get. So you can send that link if you have a Canvas or Google or whatever you have, you can send it through email and then students can use it.
Yeah.
And other people can use it too. So you can share it with other teachers and they can share it with their students. It's working that way. This game specifically will not save student scores. And the other advantage, and I talked a lot about this in previous shows, they don't have to log in. So there's no personal information from the students going anywhere.
Yeah.
All right. So we helped share with you some of the potential in vibe coding and also some of the challenges. What do you think about the potential?
Yeah, so the potentials are that it helps teachers to upgrade their skills by getting the kind of learning materials that they need for their students in a twinkle of an eye. And so those are the good things about Claude AI, that you can, without programming knowledge or anything, you just enter very specific information in the prompt and then you get your result that you can work with in your classroom.
The challenge at the same time is that sometimes it doesn't work as you expected, and you have to really figure out that you're going to have to prompt the AI, right? And we prompted Claude probably 12 times before we got what we wanted. So it will take a little bit of time. But even with all of that, we were able to create that game fairly quickly. And as you prompt Claude to create these mini programs more and more times, it'll get easier because you will start understanding what kind of directions really help create a viable mini game for students to practice a specific skill. So today on AI in the Classroom, we talked about Claude and vibe coding inside Claude, and we'll see you next time on AI in the Classroom.